Imagine a place where the very soil beneath your feet is soaked with the blood of fallen comrades, where every breath is tainted by the stench of death and the echoes of distant screams haunt your waking moments. Bullets zip over your head and explosions obliterate your eardrums. Now, imagine monstrous manifestations of every fear, trauma, and inner demon come to life, relentlessly and viciously assaulting you. Welcome to the world of Ad Infinitum, a deeply demented horror game that lures you on a harrowing journey through the darkest recesses of the human mind. I recently played this game, not really expecting it to do more than just provide a few jump scares. However, as I dove into the game, it creepily unsettled me and yet somehow managed to pull me in. By the very end, I had experienced a story that goes beyond just the video game. What I had seen seeped out and slowly seared itself into my brain. I was disturbed, unhinged, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It bothered me and drove me to do this psychological analysis of the game and its inspirations. I sought to understand. Ad Infinitum is a first-person psychological horror game set in the haunting context of World War I. It is a chilling exploration into the mental and physical horrors faced by soldiers during the Great War. Today we'll discuss the game's inspirations, the psychological issues it dives into, and how it all ties back to real-life experiences, including the theme of family trauma. If you have any issues with the topic at hand, I would strongly encourage you to click off. Also, naturally, to be able to explain everything here, there will be spoilers. Ad infinitum is Latin for to infinity. Set amidst the chaos of World War I, the game places you in the shoes of Paul von Schmidt, a German soldier grappling with the physical and mental trauma of war. What makes this game truly gripping is how it intertwines historical elements with surreal, disturbing imagery, creating the atmosphere that's both terrifying and profoundly immersive. World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict that lasted from July 28, 1914 to November 11, 1918. It involved the world's major powers, primarily centered in Europe. The causes of World War I are often traced back to several long-term immediate factors: nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and the alliance system. These factors created an atmosphere of tension and suspicion that ultimately led to war. Trench warfare was a defining feature of World War I. Soldiers on both sides dug extensive networks of trenches that stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border. These trenches were muddy, rat-infested, and filled with disease. Soldiers endured constant bombardment, artillery fire, and the threat of poison gas attacks. The setting of Ad Infinitum is a direct reflection of this brutal reality. The game captures the horrors of trench warfare, where soldiers face daily peril and witnessed unimaginable carnage. The psychological toll of this prolonged exposure to danger and death was immense. During World War I, the term shell shock was used to describe psychological trauma experienced by soldiers. It was characterized by symptoms such as nightmares, flashbacks, severe anxiety, and a sense of relentless dread. Today, we recognize these symptoms as indicative of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Soldiers experienced the constant fear of death and witnessed the horrors of industrialized warfare, where mass casualties were common. The mental trauma of World War I affected millions of soldiers, with estimates suggesting that up to 20% of soldiers on all sides suffered from some form of psychological trauma. Ad Infinitum delves into various mental issues, starting with PTSD. The flashbacks, the intrusive thoughts, and the hypervigilance portrayed in the game are all classic symptoms. Consider the character of Hans, who is portrayed as a soldier with missing eyes, symbolizing blindness to reality and the loss of humanity in the face of war's brutality. Hans is Paul's alter ego. His disgusting appearance and oppressive presence in the game are a direct manifestation of Paul's inner turmoil.
Your entire company! Why couldn't you at least have had the decency to die? The rest of them!
Hans represents the fragmented psyche of the soldier, embodying the dissociative states that many soldiers experienced. This relationship between Paul and Hans can be linked to the split personality in soldiers' identities, where one part continues to function in civilian life while the other remains trapped in the hellish memories of the battlefield. Throughout the game, Paul grapples with the lingering effects of his upbringing and the strained relationships within his family. His father, Carl, a stern and emotionally distant war veteran, imposed his own traumatic experiences and views of military glory onto his sons, Paul and Johannes. The trauma from his family life compounds with the horrors of trench warfare, manifesting in Paul's fractured mind. The game portrays how Paul's unresolved family conflict and his father's authoritarianism contribute to his internal struggles and psychological breakdowns. His struggle to reconcile with his mother's neglect and the broader family dysfunction becomes central to this psychological growth. Paul's journey reflects the broader impact of war trauma on families, illustrating how the scars of war extend far beyond the battlefield. For example, adding to the complexity, Paul's grandpa, Wilhelm. Ultimately, Paul's journey in Ad Infinitum is a quest for emotional healing, forgiveness, and understanding. The resolution of his family's unresolved conflicts becomes intertwined with his efforts to confront the horrors of war and the monsters waiting for him in the shadows of his mind. Through his journey, the game challenges players to consider how familial relationships shape our identities and influence our ability to cope with trauma. To some degree, I'm sure many of us can relate on this front. Maybe you have unresolved issues between you and your father or mother. Connecting this to real-life experiences, historical documentation and literature from World War I provide first-hand accounts of the mental toll of trench warfare. There are letters, diaries, and memoirs from soldiers describing the haunting memories, the long-lasting psychological scars, and the difficulty in readjusting to civilian life. For instance, Erich Maria Remarque's novel All Quiet on the Western Front provides a vivid portrayal of the psychological effects of war. In the book, Remarque writes, "The war has ruined us for everything." This quote encapsulates the sentiment of many soldiers who return from war only to find themselves unable to reconnect with the world they had left behind. The damage of war had left an unforgettable mark on their psyche, making it difficult to find peace or normalcy. Literary works like Remarque's and Siegfried Sassoon's poetry give voice to these experiences. They describe relentless fear, the sense of loss, and the mental breakdowns that many soldiers endured. Sassoon, a decorated British soldier and a poet, wrote, "I died in hell. They call it Passchendaele." And for those of you who don't know, Passchendaele is a small village in West Flanders, Belgium, where one of the deadliest battles between the Germans and the British and the Allies of World War I took place. It resulted in the death of an estimated 800,000 soldiers, a massive human cost. This line from Sassoon's poem Memorial Tablet depressingly illustrates the mental scars of war, where soldiers felt like they died emotionally and spiritually even while physically surviving. Psychiatric studies post-World War I were groundbreaking in understanding and treating psychological trauma. The term shell shock emerged to describe the symptoms soldiers experienced. These studies laid the groundwork for our modern understanding of what PTSD is and other trauma-related disorders, all of which are vividly depicted in the game. Additionally, the game's focus on family trauma mirrors the real-life struggles of veterans who returned home, not just with their own scars, but with the strained relationships and family dynamics that were deeply afflicted by their experiences. Consider the work of Dr. W.H.R. Rivers, who treated soldiers with shell shock at Craig Lockhart Hospital. Rivers' innovative treatments, which included talking therapy, helped many soldiers, including the poet Wilfred Owen, to cope with their trauma. In Ad Infinitum, Paul's journey toward confronting his demons can be seen as a parallel to the therapeutic process that Rivers advocated for. If you got the happy ending like I did, you see Paul eventually reunite with his family. And one specific thing that I want to highlight was a note written by Paul's father lamenting over how foolish he was, pushing his sons to fight and die for country. He shows remorse for not having been a better father or husband. Gas attacks were a terrifying reality of World War I, introduced by both the Allies and the Central Powers in an effort to break the stalemate of trench warfare. Mustard, chlorine, and phosgene gas were all used, causing horrific injuries and death. The gas attack sequence in Ad Infinitum serves to illustrate the real-life horror of chemical warfare during World War I. It brings to life the dangers faced by soldiers and the psychological trauma that the gas attacks inflicted. For soldiers like Paul, gas attacks represented a particularly gruesome aspect of warfare, leaving survivors with lasting physical and psychological damage. And probably one of the most intense scenes for me was in the beginning, where we're sent down a path of certain destruction through the trenches, and as we're running around, we hear yelling from soldiers on both sides, bullets zipping by, and explosions setting off near us. And it's so loud, it's painfully loud. It's extremely intense and provides the player a relatively realistic feel for what it may have felt like to be in that situation. I couldn't help but wonder, how could anyone have gone through such a scary moment? And for those that did live through that, how could they ever be the same? These events also underline the game's commitment to historical accuracy and psychological realism. By incorporating such events, Ad Infinitum pays homage to the soldiers who endure these horrors and draws attention to the long-lasting impact of such traumas. It's not just about the scares, it's about understanding the human condition under extreme duress. The game's portrayal of Paul's journey through the horrors of war is a testament to the resilience and the fragility of the human mind.